Rebecca Davis, a weird, scary, and interesting. Today, we're going to be talking about the fourth part of our former monarchies ancient times series. Today, we're going to be getting into the late Bronze Age. Can you believe this is the second last part of our former monarchies series? Then I don't know. We'll have to find out. So, today I'm not replicating any of the late Bronze Age fashions because in the late Bronze Age the fashions were the late Bronze Age, the woman's fashion varied by culture, but generally featured long garments, often layered, and elaborated ornaments. Kind of almost like this, like the bracelet I'm wearing. Like Minoan women, for example, were known for their bell-shaped skirts and low-cut blouses. If you looked it up, that would not be appropriate for YouTube. Maybe for an OnlyFans star, but because that would be totally against the community guidelines on YouTube. For the and integrated jewelry. While women in other regions favored long robes and stoles and tunics. So mainly I'm just today, since I don't got that stuff. Well, unless you count the bracelet, which I got yesterday at a yard sale. Okay. So I mainly have incorporated from my makeup to the headband, my black headband. You'll recognize it from an episode I did right before Pope Leo became Pope. When they were trying to figure out who's going to be the next guy in charge. You know, the episode... No, never mind. Well, technically around that time. I wore it in the third unboxing video. So yeah, around that time. Frame, they were, during the conclave. And we learned... And you all know that. We learned that in another video. That was before the third unboxing. So, and my makeup also is mainly incorporated with the style, like the colors of the late Bronze Age. The late Bronze Age colors were blue, red, yellow, brown, black, white, and with some engraved green. So again, we're gonna see the green like we did with the East Asian Bronze Age, but not as much greens as we seen then. And then there's orange and gray. So they more or less, you could say, had the primary colors coming used around that time. Not all of them, but if you go through through history, each history has their own mix of main colors. Like we seen last week was, as you had the East Bronze Age, we would see a lot of greens because in East Asia is a lot of greens. So that's what I incorporated was a little, I have my eyeshadow today is blue and I had mixed in with a little yellow. And my my lipstick is another shade of red. And mascara counts. My mascara is black. It counts as one of the colors. So my top orange, and there's some, my skirt's kind of blues and reds, and this, as you see in the third unboxing video before, this headband is black. This is also from this, and for other headbands like it is also from a yard sale. I'll tell you, our yard sale is the best way to find some good deals. Okay, I don't know if they had yard sales in late Bronze Age. Okay, like in the late Bronze Age, we will not, some of the stuff we wear today, we will not have seen, because like tank tops back then wasn't existed, because back in the late Bronze Age it was too cold. You know how you feel when you put your central air on, or your air conditioner, or you're in the middle of winter. Imagine that. Because that's what people back in ancient times, the temperature in the world was a lot different climate-wise. And we have learned before, in part 1, that with, I think it was the Indigenous Valley, that, the law, they were going through climate change too, like we are going to through right now, except they had more droughts, and that, like us, the water's going up, or some point in history the water goes down, and climate change has been all different parts of history. And I noticed I was reading part I was going through scripts for rereading some scripts. Part 2, it kind of screwed up. It was for when I did part 2, if you remember. It's been 2 parts ago. I accidentally mentioned King Midas, but it's not King Midas. That was the guy involved of correlating the downfall of the kingdom of Assyria. It was Midas. Sorry for a mix-up. So, it was Midas, not Midas. But we will learn about King Midas next week, I think. All right. Yeah. King Midas will be next week. So the legendary king of gold wasn't the guy involved of taking down kingdom of Assyria. Sorry. Totally different guy. Midas, not Midas. Thought to put a correction there. Obviously my brain was brain. So, sorry. Okay. You know what? We're all human. We're bound to make mistakes or two. It's part of human DNA. Okay. Let's get back to... Okay, now, since we're in part 4, and hopefully you enjoyed or enjoying this series so far. Can you believe we're almost done this series? Okay. Now, like we did in part 2 and part 3, for the ones that have not been watching this series so far, we will go over what former monarchies in the ancient time period was about. And for the ones that haven't been watching this, me as the host of Weird Scan and Answer, I advise you to watch part 1, 2, and 3. So then you could catch up. It's just like catching the middle or the ending of a movie. You can't follow through. You can't follow the plot or a TV show if you're tuning right in. That's why a lot of shows that recap for the ones that, if you're just tuning in, we will recap. That's why the whole idea of recap, so we could go over what we have learned so far in this series. And that's why I also like that when it's like a continuation of some an episode. uh, like, uh, an episode they have a continue on, like, you watch them, any type of show, they have a plot twist in there that they continue next week. They say, well, when they get to, you watch the next week's episode, they say, what, so if you haven't caught last week's episode, we will recap. So, that's what we're gonna recap. And so you can learn what this series is about. If you just are tuning in, like halfway through this series. Halfway through, next week's the fifth and final part of Former Monarchies Ancient Time series. And then next year, in season 3, Weird, Scary, and Interesting, we'll talk about Former Monarchies Antiquities. And that would be totally different because we're going through each continent. Each different part of the world, more depth. Okay, let's recap on the former monarchies first. So you get to know what that is about, what the meaning of it is about. Okay? Got it? Good. Okay. Former monarchies refers to a system of government. You know, we have a government that makes laws and that's and enforces those laws. That's what monarchies way back used to do. And there's probably still some monarchies still today that probably have something to do with their government, but most are gone to the constitutional way. I know there's different, like, co-ruling, elective, which we're going to talk about in a different series, which I'm working on. There's monarchies that are the monarch is inherited to. It's almost like the constitutional monarchs that we see, but they have more power, or more, they're more in charge. And then there's some monarchs that we learned that in one episode there's elective, there's co-ruling. There's different types of monarchs. More or less a constitutional, elective, inherited. For some reason my brain will actually let me say the actual word for that type of monarch. Is it an imperial monarch, like we see in Japan? They mostly call that if you're an emperor. Okay. Anyways, let's continue. So, at one time, monarchs were in charge, and most monarchs, somewhat, it depends on what type of monarch it is in charge of the government. Like here in Canada, our king King Charles, since he's constitutional, here in all over the Commonwealth, he doesn't really have much to do with the government aside swearing in, as involved with his prime ministers, but most his history, mostly monarchs at one time. And if you look at way back in history, monarchs in way back in England's history, for example, had a big impact in policy, law, like bills passing and all of that. And that's right through, all through, at one time, through a bunch, all through the world at one time. A bunch of monarchs were in charge of the government. And technically, constitutional monarchs are technically the prime minister's boss. So yeah, sometime we'll explain what in a different video of constitutional monarchs are, but well, if you want to know constitutional monarchies, are more or less a monarch that obeys the constitution of their country. That's mainly what it is. So yeah, monarchs at one time were in charge of their country's government. Okay, and historically or currently, there were a monarch. So yeah, historically there has been monarchies, and through the series we're learning that historically there has been monarchies that fell in time, and all through the other series of the former monarchies topic we're gonna be talking about. We're gonna learn about different monarchies that fell over time in history, right to present day. And yes, there has been some monarchies that had a comeback. Maybe sometime we will explore that and see what monarchs that came back had a kind of, like if it was a show, it had its own comeback, like as I call it, remix now. Which well, actually, and yeah, that's true. That's like I said last week, mentioned, and I think it's part 2, that there has been some monarchs that had a comeback. Like they ended, like England, for example, when an ancestor of mine, Charles I. This is way before Charles III, long time. This is like, I think his main time, it's great uncle, I think. Uh, Charles I, when we all know, got executed. Got his head severed from his neck. Um, because the political climate had changed, and there's a and because of I think it was, the whole religious thing, uh which I'm actually gonna mention in when, you know how I did the scary things of the Victorian era. I'm gonna be doing extension to that. We're gonna go through different scary parts of English history, right up to our last late monarch, Elizabeth II. Uh, unless there's something, God forbid, happens to this current one. Hopefully not. And then we'll learn about some scary stuff, scary things just in England. So we'll, it's, was, not the, because my brain's not working. Okay, that would be during the Carolingian era. That's Charles II's, no, first this time. And there's some aspects that changed, like religious persecution, political instability. Well, beliefs of witches, but that was not what caused them to be not the king anymore. Public executions. So more or less, things changed, and then he, that's how, Charles II, no, first, sorry, second was son, the government, more or less practically overthrown him, and he got declassified as, charged as treason, and he was executed. And that's how the first in interment started. And then we see Oliver Cromwell come in, and then Oliver Cromwell died. His son Richard took over as Lord Protector for a while, and then we had enough of the Lord Protector era, the internment era. So they brought back Charles II, which at that time, Charles II's over in France, chilling with his other relatives. Because that time, Charles II and Charles I was alive, France still had their kingdom. So you see, Charles II, they brought Charles II back, and England got potentially, a remake, brought back from and Lord Protectorship to a monarchy, because there's a Lord, as Lord, when we also will learn, we're gonna I'll do the scary things of the first internment era of England. And there's a lot, it was since Oliver Cromwell was Puritan, not knocking the Puritans. But Oliver, since Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan, he banned everything from wearing makeup to celebrating Christmas. Yeah, how dare he? Because he thought that people should be worshiping God. Me, I would have a problem having somebody force their religion on me. It's like, oh, fine, you don't want to celebrate Christmas, go ahead. It's not the only person in the world probably doesn't. But you don't need to force anybody else not to. But then you can see why people got fed up with the Lord Protectorship in England during Charles II's era, between Charles I and Charles II era. Which Charles II is called the Restoration era, because the kingdom of England was restored. As I said, Charles II is called Party King. The Horrible Histories has a very fun song about Charles II. And yes, Charles I and II are my ancestors. They're like my Tim's cousins, so. So yeah. So England had England's people in England got fed up with the way the Lord Protectorship was running, because they were forced to not celebrate Christmas and presents and all, because as I learned in Horrible Histories, episodes about this, the Puritans thought at that time that Christmas and makeup and even a goose was sinful. It's like, how do you know? It was Christmas was started with the Catholic Church. The old Oliver Cromwell should have had good talking to the Pope at the time. There'll probably be a fight or two break out. So, and he also again with the whole monarchs that were had their restoration. There was monarchs like France and Greece, but France and Greece more did, as I said, the monarchy hokey pokey. You take the monarchy in, okay, you put the monarchy in, you take the monarchy out, you put the monarchy in, and you shake it all about. And that's what it's all about. And France does that a bunch of many times. I think the last time they had a monarch, I think I heard it was a dispute between the French government at the time and the last king over some flag because last king wanted it back to white, kind of like this wall, but more bright white, almost like the table. But this is on, but you can't see the table. You can see the wall. And Greece did the same thing, but we all know the reason why Greece disappeared, which we'll learn more in later series about it. It's kind of like rigged voting, but we'll learn about that in later series. So, if it wasn't for England's restoration period and them throwing out the Lord Protectorship, that today King Charles would not be king. There would be no king of the UK, because it'd be probably like the United States, no monarch. Good thing for the people back in the 16th century getting bored of the whole Lord Protectorship and fed up. So yeah, and currently, yeah, right, as we're gonna learn in the last series of the former monarchies topic, we're gonna learn about monarchs that went away in modern time. I know currently you don't hear it on the news that some kingdom went away, but a good example is Hawaii is a modern kingdom that disappeared in modern time, because more or less it was forced to end. So the United States can annex it. But I heard that it's still classified as a kingdom, but there's no monarch. Because their last monarch was Queen Ukulani, and Queen Ukulani is not alive anymore. Unless they can find a close relative of Queen Ukulani, because she didn't have kids. Okay, now we're monarch. Okay, in like a king or a queen. Like in some places, hey, a king or a queen. Like Hawaii had a queen. Like Queen Ukulani was the queen. And there's empresses. There's shahs, because Iran had a shah before the Shah got thrown over, and it's what it is today. There's high kings, North American, the Native American Indians and First Nations, as we call them. So it's more or less Indians on this side of the pond that were actually here first. They have chiefs. There's one book I was reading years ago about this lady that was from ancient China. She was technically technically ruler of ancient China. She was descendant of chieftains. Is kind of almost like chiefs, but in different sense. And yes, in Polynesia and countries, they have chiefs. I think it's New Zealand has, well, Namori. I think they have the current monarch is a queen. She just got on the throne not long ago. Yeah. I'm just trying. Ireland had high kings. I know I'm related to the last high king. So many times, great niece of him. Uh, Ronick's brother to Robert the Bruce. Uh, mm, I'm just thinking off of my head what different titles. So there's different titles for different monarchs all over the world, and and like oh, Russia. Yes, we know that in Russia we used to be a kingdom. This is way before what it is today. Um, when Tsar Nicholas II and his wife, Tsarina Alexandria, which is a cousin of mine, they were czars and a czar and a czarina, which I think I've read is equivalent to an emperor and an empress. I think so because, uh, yeah, because remember Catherine the Great? She was an empress of Russia. And there's Empress Elizabeth of Russia. Austria had emperors and empresses, and even Mexico did at one time. This emperors and empresses were way in Mexico way after the whole Mayan and Aztec empires fell. And I think they had chiefs in the Mayan. And maybe it's well, you know what I mean. Each different place, kingdoms have different types of titles for their monarchies, and and it's last week our three East Asian Bronze Age kingdoms. They were kings that ruled it. So, but in later series, we will probably dabble in get into the era of the emperor and empresses and czars and czarinas. Oh, yeah. Okay. They rule but have been abolished. If not, we wouldn't be talking about it, would we? Or replaced by other forms of government, such as republics. Okay. Now, as I was saying before, there's different types of republics. There's a communist republic, and there is a constitutional / democratic republic. Like I used last week, for example, North Korea and South Korea, because they're two examples of a communist republic and a democratic. And we see in other parts of the world, like they have communists. The definition of it is a republic forcing a government that forces way of life on their citizens that they see fit. And there's some consequences if you don't obey. As I said in last week's episode, just imagine the laws you have being 10 times worse, and the consequences of you breaking that law 10 times worse if you lived in a dictatorship. Now, constitutional or slash democratic, you're more or less free to live your life. You don't have the fear of somebody of the consequences. But the consequences of a constitutional or democratic republic breaking their laws is not as extreme as if you were living in a dictatorship. So, yeah. So this is two different examples of the difference of a communist republic and a constitution. Two far different things. One's worse than the other. Okay. Okay. Now, we'll move on and learn some about ancient times. And guess what? I'm actually using the big tablet this time. I figured out how to bring the storage space down. I had to delete one of the apps because one of the apps were using up a big chunk of the space. Okay, ancient times refers to a period in history that spans from the earliest known civilizations, to roughly the fall of the Western Roman Empire in AD 476, encompassing a vast stretch of human history and culture. So, as I say, we have to go all the way back in history to come back and all the way back in history to learn about what happened in history, like the cultures and that fell and what things were like back then, to come down to modern day. Because through history, human history has changed a lot. And the planet also has changed a lot over history. And also the fashion has changed over the history. And also the way we cook and places we live, because, as they say, we started as hunters and gatherers as humans, and to the point in history where humans got the urge to just settle down, that they didn't have to move all the time. And back in history, it took one person to start the idea of monarchy. So once he started, kind of influenced other cultures all over the world to start their own. They thought, that's a great idea. Let's try to give that a shot. And over history, that some cultures, that idea of royalty lasted for a good stretch of human history, and then it stopped for some reason, whether the political climate changed, as we learned in the other 3 series, whether it was like the Minoans or the Mycenaeans, there was a natural disaster, like the indigenous valley, there would have been a drought, or in some cases another kingdom conquered the other kingdom. Like last week's episode, more or less we had 3 kingdoms that got conquered. Because we learned the Han Kingdom conquered Gojo's son, a Korean kingdom, and incorporated that in there. And then the 2 Chinese kingdoms, Xia and Shang, almost forgot about it, conquered each other. So, or there's or the kingdom that stops because whether the current ruler doesn't have a child, children of their own to take over, or they don't have any living relatives, like the childless monarch. A monarch would come to mind would be the last emperor of China. He didn't have kids, so eventually it stopped. And if they don't find any, if they can't, and with the search of any living family members are going up the tree, and they don't find any, they have to more or less say that the kingdom's done. Or as we learned from Mexico, Emperor Maximilian, why that happened, because the political climate changed and Maximilian got assassinated. Yeah. Which is not the only monarch in history that's had that happen. Okay. Let's continue. Late Bronze Age is the 4th episode of Former Monarchies Ancient Times series. Former Monarchies from Ancient Times, Part 4. Late Bronze Age. We will learn about the Late Bronze Age. So, this is a later part of the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is almost done. So next week we're gonna learn about the Iron Age. So we'll get into the Iron Age next week. Okay. Sip my Coke and then we'll get into the late Bronze Age. Late Bronze Age is a final period of the late Bronze Age, technically between 1300 and 11 BCE. Yeah, 1300 and 1100 BCE. Characteristic by significant socialistic and cultural collapse. So, this is the period where of the late Bronze Age collapse, where everything's collapsing in this era. Culture is collapsing. In cultural collapse in Eastern Mediterranean the Near East. So it's around the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, and Near East. So this period, often called the Late Bronze Age collapse or Bronze Age collapse, involving the destruction of major cities. So we're going to be seeing a lot of cities gone. There's somebody coming in with a wrecking ball and knocking them out. The decline of powerful civilizations. So civilizations are gone in this era. The dispute of trade and cultural practices. Ooh. Oh, dispute. The people are disputing of trade in this era and cultural practices. We're thinking, was that really supposed to go that way? We're supposed to trade that way? Is the cultural aspect supposed to be like that? Okay. In this period, there was 3 kingdoms that stopped existing of something stopping them to exist. So, like we learned in the last 3 parts of this, something stopped them. Let's find out what caused these 3 late Bronze Age kingdoms to stop existing. They're not around anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on this series, would they? Oh. And this period we're talking about, this era we're talking about, things have changed. Okay, everything's collapsed now. The way life they know is had it. It's like, that song, The End of the World? It's the end of the world as we know it. So it would be it's the end of the world as they knew it. So, yeah, and this is going to be a short video this week since we have 3 kingdoms. We're going to discuss and find out what happened in this late Bronze Age era during the late Bronze Age collapse. And next week, for finale of this series, is be long. So for this series, let's find out what the three former kingdoms from the late Bronze Age, what happened? Okay. So, get into it. And find out. Okay. Okay. Number one. Our first late Bronze Age kingdom was a Mitanni kingdom. A Mitanni kingdom was a Middle Eastern kingdom that was from 1500 BC to 1300 BCE. So it was around for a good time. When the Mitanni kingdom was conquered. So one out of the ballpark we got to conquer. And untimely incorporated into the Assyrian Empire. Remember the Assyrian Empire from part 2? The one I screwed up on? I'm mixing up with Midas to Midas with Midas. It was Midas. Okay. Incorporated into the Assyrian Empire. Okay. That was all well for a while, I guess. Until it fell to the Hittites. In 14th century BCE. And was later further subjugated by the Assyrians. So it was swallowed up by the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians lost it to the Hittites. The Assyrians got it back from the Hittites. It's like an interesting game of tennis between the Assyrians and the Hittites. Losing its independent status by the 13th century BCE. The Mitanni kingdom was ruled by a series of kings, with some of the most notable being King Kartra, King Sustera, or in brackets, Sayus had eight Atar, and King Tusharata, and King Sha'at Uara II. The Mitanni kings, like Tusharati, also engaged in diplomatic relations. So, like modern kings, they get involved in seeing foreigner, for or in uh diplomatic people in yeah, relations and try to keep them tied and and including foreign alliances. So the diplomatic thing will help with the keeping with the forming alliances, seeing who uh would help their back in time of war. And this time, so in this time period, forming alliances, we would see it would be through marriage. So in this part of the world, the Middle East, it was close to Egypt, so it would be through marrying Egyptian royalty. Like we see a lot in history, a lot of kingdoms try to keep good alliance by marrying somebody in the family. Like, for example, Princess, I'm trying to think of a Middle Eastern name. Okay, I can't think of one. I'll just look one up. Okay. Okay, say Princess Farah of Syria is a bargaining chip uh, for her father, King Sharati, and in order to keep peace between him and Egypt, he marries his daughter off to probably King Tut. All works well, she's going to move to Egypt and be the future queen of Egypt. The last independent king was King Sharate, after whose death Mint Anti was eventually absorbed by the Hittites and then the Assyrians. So since he died, they got the Hittites and the Assyrians picked it up. So actually, I shouldn't have said it when I was explaining the whole diplomatic relations through marriage. I should have said that it was Princess Farah of Mint Anti would be the bargaining ship for her father, King Tusharate. And then it works out that uh, Princess Pharaoh would be off and be married to King Tut. And she'd be moving to Egypt. So, yeah. So I guess, okay, back to after King Tusharate had died, the Anti was eventually absorbed by the Hittites and the Assyrians. So they kind of took advantage. It's kind of like what happened with one of those, I think it was what we've seen during in Scotland around the time of two of my ancestors, of Robert the Bruce and Edward the First's time. But that Edward the First won Scotland, but eventually Robert the Bruce was put on the Scottish throne after, I think it was Alexander the Great's death. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, so I guess the Hittites, in that sense, the Hittites and the Assyrians thought we got a chance to jump in there and take Mint Anti as our own. Now, you know, Hittites, if I'm right, yeah, they were from Turkey. Yeah. We learned about them when they sacked Babylon. We learned about the Hittites. Yeah, so the Hittites are from Turkey. So they'd be in the vicinity there. So yeah. Okay. Okay, let's move on from Mint Anti to, well, I guess the Hittites and the Assyrians are thinking that there's nobody in our way to pick up Mint Anti that would challenge us. It's like it was a dog-eat-dog world back then. It still is. Okay. Let's move on from Mint Anti Kingdom to number 2. Our second and last one is Kingdom of Arzawar. Arzawa. The Kingdom of Arzawar Awa was a Western Asian kingdom. So we're going a little more kind of in the western part. Because we were in the east and now we're in the west. So, yeah. It's our only Western Asian kingdom in this part. That was from 1500 BC until 1200 BC, when the kingdom of Arzawa were conquered and fragmented by the Hittite Empire. Okay, we're seeing it again. It's picking up another area. Now it's we have 2 for 2 for conquering. And prominently during the reign of King Marcel II, while Arzawa intentionally resisted Hittite expansion, so they didn't want that happening. Even formed alliances with Marcinian Greece. So brackets ha it was eventually subdued and its territory divided among various small states. So since they resisted, they formed an alliance with the Mycenaeans, so the Hittites would not pick them up. They eventually broke down into various smaller cities, so they more or less each one went their own way. Because I guess they were thinking it's the only way for us to be safe if we just broke up. We're filing divorce papers now. We don't want it happening, but nothing we can do. A pesky mother-in-law after us. Okay, including... Okay, these states are including Ma'ara and Shiha Riverland. The kingdom of Arzawa was ruled by several kings throughout its history, including Quranta, that was easy to pronounce, Tar, Hunt, Aradu, Tark, As, and Zit, and Uyghur is recognized as the last independent king, of Arzawa, ruling around 1300 to 1320 to 1300 BC. So you ha you ha ha zit was the last one. That's it. Once I guess one, and he was the last one around that time at the time ruling when the Hittites were coming in and taking over, trying to take over his kingdom, and he decided making trying to make a diplomatic move and seeing if if the Mycenaeans would have his back and just help him out and his country, his kingdom out. But in the downfall, it more or less ended to his to Zit's kingdom. We're just gonna call him that. That making it just break apart. Because more or less he was, as the old saying says, he was between a rock and a hard place. What was he supposed to do? Yeah. Thinking that if we go to war, there's a chance that I might not win. There could be a chance I win, but that could be slim. If anybody knows how powerful the Hittites were, well, they were pretty powerful. I think they even fought the Egyptians during one of the kings. I think one of the Ramses. I think. Yeah, because I know one of the pharaohs were killed by, I think it was Hittites, I think. So they were pretty powerful. If you think the Romans were powerful, these would probably beat the Romans in probably in a staring game or an arm wrestling game. And the Hittites were a long ago, back in history, way before the Ottoman Empire. And that's another empire we'll learn about in other series. Okay. I can sympathize with this last king, that he more or less his best cause was to just break the kingdom up into several ruling cities that they have each of the sectors of his kingdom just break apart, and maybe they do their own thing for a while, and maybe someday they could get back together. I don't know. Where is my auntie sit today? Let's see. Auntie, you mean. Okay. Mint Auntie today sits in northern Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. So since broken up, this if it wasn't broken up, those three that it wouldn't be. So yeah, so there's it. They're so I guess this last king made the best decision. And you've seen Turkey's pretty vast itself. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's move on from Mint Anti-Kingdom to the third and last kingdom. Third and last late Bronze Age kingdom, which is Fo E Nis Fo E Ni Isaiah was a Middle Eastern kingdom. So we got two Middle Eastern kingdoms, one Western Asian kingdom in this episode. That was from 1200 BC until 539 BC, when Fo E Nisaya was gradually declining due to external pressures and conquests. So it was under pressure. So we got 3 kingdoms in total that been conquered in this episode. Like part 3. The Fo E Nis Anis, known for their seafaring and trade, were eventually incorporated into larger empires like Neo-Syrians. You remember we talked about them episodes ago. And Achaemenid and the Roman Empire. So the Romans would be about this time. While their direct control over the region diminished, and their culture and linguist legacy included the alphabet. So they had their you see the alphabet coming up, and the different cultures have their own different alphabet, like the Greeks and that. Continue the fluence of the Mediterranean world. Phoenicia was ruled by various powers throughout its history, including the Syrians, Babylonians, Persians, Romans. It was also under the control of Alexander the Great. You remember we talked about Alexander the Great in ancient Egypt. Because that one has I think it was general or something. It was the father to Cleopatra the Seventh, my favorite pharaoh. Uh, so, and okay, back to Alexander. Alexander the Great and his successors. So, a lot of his successors ruled it. And the sea suits and Ptolemies during the Hellenistic period. Let's see what the Hellenistic period. Okay, the Hellenistic period. This is what it is. Hellenistic period covers the time in Greek and Mediterranean history after classical Greek between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and the death of Cleopatra the Seventh in 30 BC, which was followed by the ascendancy of the Roman Empire as significated by the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. That's what that is. So yeah. So this kingdom was more pressured, had a lot of pressures, and like that. Well, I guess during the late Bronze Age collapse, so you see a lot of it was easy to conquer a lot of kingdoms. But it's nice that we see the starting, including we see a form of the alphabet that influenced the Mediterranean. So technically there wasn't one monarch that ruled us specifically. It was just different regions that ruled Phoenicia, including Alexander the Great controlling this last kingdom we're talking about. You think about it, I wonder if he actually, since he controlled it, like he always did here, Alexander the Great always had a habit of naming places that he conquered after him, or naming it the female version of his name, Alexandria, like we see in Egypt. There's a place in Egypt called Alexandria, Egypt. And that's where the library, and there's a library called Library of Alexandria, which we all know what happened there. It went up in smoke. That's the thing I mentioned when we first started this series that could have had. That's the place where could have had the location of the land of Punt, and they say I've seen years ago that could have been possibly where they could have the knowledge and the stories about Atlantis. But since the Alexandria Library Alexandria, doesn't exist anymore, all that history is gone. Would you imagine if it was around today? How many hours you could spend combing through the articles and the documents and the books that were in that library? I'd probably get lost in there. So there we answered our question. What happened to these three? They got conquered. And honestly, this time frame is so easy for the foreign kingdoms to pick them up. It's like they just walked over them, and it's like, yep, you're mine now. So, yeah. So, till next week when we... okay. Hopefully you like this topic, this series so far. And as I say, we're almost done it. So if that, you know the drill. Like and subscribe. And don't forget to comment. And if you want to, you can tell me in the comment section what your favorite part of this series has been so far. And if you have a favorite ancient kingdom, and like and subscribe and comment. And don't forget to ring the bell. So, for now, till next week, which is going to be a big one, we're going to be talking about 15 kingdoms next week. Oh my God. That's a lot. But a great way to probably end the whole former monarchies ancient times series. And next week we're gonna find. Next week I'll tell you what kingdom the legendary King Midas had ruled over. You know, the guy with the legendary power. If he touched anything, he would turn it into gold. It's not only a fairy tale. I bet a lot of you read the fairy tale about King Midas. But then he's got his, I think years ago, there was a brand of, auto body shops that had a jingle called Midas Touch. Except they didn't turn the automobiles into gold. Okay. Till now, we will, till next week, I will say goodbye. Goodbye.